Right, so this is another problem on Bayes' theorem, and this time we have two bowls. Let's call them A and B, and each of these bowls has cookies in them, right? So cookies or biscuits. So each one of them has cookies in them. And what we are told is that um, bowl A has 10 chocolate cookies, right? So they have 10 chocolate cookies and 30 plain cookies. And bowl B has 20 of each, right? So the total is 40 for bowl B and 40 for bowl A. So each has 40 cookies, but that's how they're distributed. And we pick one of these bowls at random, either A or B, right? So we pick a bowl, and from there we take out one cookie, and the cookie turns out to be a plain one. And what we are asked is, what is the probability? So given that the cookie is plain, what is the probability that it came from bowl A, right? So this is the question that we are being asked. So as before, I'm not going to tell you what the solution is. We are going to work it out together, which means that every now and then I will ask you a question, and then I will stop talking for 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, you can you figure out what the answer to the question is, and if you need more time, then you can just pause the video. But after 5 seconds, then I will give you the answer and we will take the story forward, right? So the question, just to recap, is that we get a plain cookie, and now we have to find out what the probability that it came from A is. So let me define two events, right? Let me define the event A, that the cookie that a cookie comes from bowl A, and let B be the event that a cookie comes from bowl B, right? So what is the probability of A? What is the probability of A equal to? What's the probability that a cookie comes from bowl A? And what's the probability that a cookie comes from bowl B? So I give you a cookie and I ask you, what's the probability it came from A, and what's the probability it came from B? So your 5 seconds begin now. Right, so some of you must have figured out that the probability that a cookie came from bowl A is half, right? And the same goes for bowl B. Now why is this the case? Well, remember, we first picked the bowl, and what's the probability of picking bowl A? Well, that's just half. And what's the probability of picking bowl B? That's also half. We pick a bowl at random. Now once we've picked a bowl, we will get a cookie. So if I give you a cookie, it could have come either from A or it could have come from B. So the probability of the cookie having come from bowl A is simply the probability that I picked bowl A. And the probability that it came from B is simply the probability that I picked B. So the probability of the cookie coming from A is half, and the probability of it having come from B is half, right? So PA is equal to PB. I'll just write this on the side. The probability of A is equal to probability of B is equal to half. So let's just put this on the side. This might come in handy later. Now, what are we being asked, right? So let's define another two events. So let's just define another two events. P, which is the probability that it's a plain cookie, and C, that it's a chocolate cookie, right? So given these two events, what probability are we being asked to calculate? So I'll give you 4 choices. Choice number 1, we're being asked what the probability of C given A is. We're being asked what the probability of A given C is, we're being asked what probability of P given A is, or we are being asked what the probability of A given P is, right? So 4 choices, we tell me what the probability expression is. So your 5 seconds begin now. Well, the probability we're being asked is that given that it's a plain cookie, what's the probability that it came from bowl A? So this is what we are being asked. So it's number 4, right? So this is the probability. So what we need to find, let me just scroll down a bit. What we need to find is what's the probability that it came from A given that it's a plain cookie, right? And what does this equal? So this is a conditional probability, and so we know that we have to apply Bayes' theorem. So what does this equal? Well, this is simply equal to probability of P given A times PA divided by probability of drawing a plain cookie, right? So that's what it is. Now, um, on the right hand side, we actually only know what probability of A is. That we figured out. It was equal to half. The other two terms we actually don't know. So let's take them in turns, right? So let's find out what the probability of drawing a plain cookie is. Well, the probability of drawing a plain cookie is simply the probability of drawing a plain cookie from A into the probability of picking A plus probability of picking a plain cookie from B into probability of actually picking jar B, right? So what does this amount to? Well, what is probability of P given A? So um, that is something I would like you to answer. So give me values for, sorry, so give me values for this. What is this equal to? Probability of A is half. So that much I'll fill up. And what's the probability of a plain cookie from B? And this one is also half. So that I'll fill up for you. So what are these two values, right? So your 5 seconds begin now. Right. So if you were looking at this table, if you came back up and if you saw this table, then you would know that in jar A there are 30 plain cookies. So if you pick jar A, then the probability of drawing a plain cookie is simply 30 divided by 40, right? And if you pick jar B and jar B had 20 cookies of each, then the probability of drawing a plain cookie is simply 20 divided by 40. So what does this amount to, right? I'm going to come back to white. So what this means is that the probability of drawing a plain cookie is simply 3 by 4 times half plus 20 by 40 is half plus half times half, right? Which I can simplify to, well actually let's just forget about it. So this is 3 by 8 plus 1 by 4, which turns out to be 8, and 3 plus 2. So this turns out to be 5 by 8. So the probability of drawing a plain cookie is 5 by 8. So we've got the denominator over here. Now all that we are left with is finding out what the probability of drawing a plain cookie given A is. Well, you know what? You'd already given the answer to that. That is simply 30 by 40, which is equal to 3 by 4. And therefore we know everything in this expression to find out the required probability. So what we are supposed to find is what's probability that the cookie came from jar A given that it's a plain cookie, and that turns out to be 3 by 4 times half divided by the 5 by 8 we just calculated. So if we simplify this, this turns out to be 3 by 8 times 8 by 5, and so this and this cancel, and this turns out to be 3 by 5. So the answer to our question, probability of A given P, is simply 3 by 5, which is equal to 60%. So that was the question, and that's how it's done.